we are here today back in the Strand, a place that we've been a few times. We're going to talk about one Robert Cecil in particular today, but we're particularly going to focus on the New Exchange and the Middle Exchange, hubs of commerce and shopping centers that were largely his design, and which came to fill up the spaces where his house, Cecil House, used to be. And here where we are right now is right next to where the so-called New Exchange was, which was something he built. And we'll get back to that in a second. But it was actually right in the middle of that road. The road is not super picturesque, so we've placed ourselves there so you can see it. We are right next to a beautiful Eleanor cross as well. But going back to Robert Cecil, we'll just cover him briefly. We might cover him more in detail than his father.
William Cecil.
Yeah, William Cecil, yeah. Lord Burleigh, I don't know why I was thinking Lord Burleigh, but that's also part of his name. But yeah, his father, William Cecil, we might get into more detail about him, because they were effectively running a lot of the country from the transition of the Tudor period to the Stuart period. And Robert Cecil is probably most famous for making a peaceful transition of power from Elizabeth I to James I, or James VI, as he was known in Scotland. Yeah, he was really a sort of a Game of Thrones character, orchestrating things from the background, a real puppeteer type. And it did take a lot of political savvy to survive in these times, because you would have lots of rivals who would curry favor from the monarch and try and be as close to the monarch as possible. And even in the 17th century and the late 16th century, it was still very important to be close to the monarch. The closer you got, the more central to power you were. And Robert Cecil certainly knew this. He particularly knew this because he was practically groomed to his position by his father. So when William Cecil his health was falling into decline and he was having a harder time managing his affairs, he knew that his second-born son from another marriage, his spare, as we tend to call them here, would be the better suited for a political career. He could see that promise in him. And so he started having him manage his affairs for him and being on the ground and becoming a part of the House of Commons early on, and became a member of the Privy Council, which is a big deal, at the young age of 29. So he was the youngest member that the Privy Council had ever had. So from an early age, he was onto the political path, and he probably had the best tutorship available. His father, who had direct contact with Elizabeth I and being her right-hand man. So in that way, his path was sort of set before him, but he knew how to play his cards right. And he was involved in many things. We might not have time to cover all of these things here, but some of the main ones to mention. So he was involved in the political execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. He was one of the ones who supposedly discovered the secret of the gunpowder plot against James I, and helped to capture and interrogate the Catholic conspirators who were set on the king's life. And of course, as I've mentioned before, he made sure that Elizabeth I opened her eyes to the idea of having a Scottish king take over, since she had no heirs. So he sort of smoothed the path for James I to set in, and have the House of Stuart to take over. So in that way, he was part of many momentous events. What I want to look at here is his competition with the City of London, and how he helped build the New Exchange in 1608, right here, to start opening up a luxury shopping area, taking what used to be the domain of the City of London and bringing it a little bit closer to court. So you had a bridge here of shopkeepers with gentry, and said gentry could often come in and shop for luxury goods here. Alright, so the reason I want to get into the New Exchange is it was actually some of the first real luxury shopping you started to see in this area here. Interestingly enough, back in the day, it used to be the City of London, which is off in that direction, that used to be the main hub of shopping and trades and crafts and businessmen. But when the new exchange got open here, all of that shopping got brought right on the doorstep of Whitehall, which was essentially court back then. So courtiers and noblemen didn't have to journey all the way to City of London. They could just shop right here. Nowadays, of course, this area is pretty well known for its luxury shopping. You could even say that shopping is more important here today than it is in the City of London, at least in the parts where the Royal Exchange was in. But of course, this was seen as a massive threat by the Lord Mayor of the City of London. He didn't want competition for shopping here, so he was writing both to the King and he was writing to Robert Cecil, complaining that they might be usurping the territory of the business people in the City of London. Which he replied, "Oh no, paraphrasing here, but we're just taking a small drop, a little quill of the keg of wealth that London has to offer here. Taking a little bit over here, it won't impact you massively much," was his reply. Alright, so one of the reasons Robert Cecil probably made sure that the new king could come in and take over was that the king would be in great debt to him. So James I would have a great debt of gratitude to pay for the man who paved the way to securing his English kingdom without any bloodshed. And indeed, richly paid he was. He was made a baron, he was made the Lord Treasurer. So he was no longer just the Secretary of State. He became the ones holding the reins to the big purse of England. And that is actually the nickname that they gave the new exchange. They called it Britain's Purse. Purse, which can be almost translated into purse. So a lot of that took place here. And a lot of it was, well, probably self-interested as well. He wanted the flow of money a little bit closer to home, especially considering that he had a townhouse and a home just a little bit further down the street that we're going to go see in a minute. But yeah, it was part of his whole scheme to make sure that more of the flow of money would come out of the City of London and straight into the pockets of royalty and himself. So even before he had built, we talked about the new exchange before, 6 years prior, he was working on his own house here, which was called Cecil House, later nicknamed Salisbury House, is what it was more commonly known as. But he was basically building his abode here during Queen Elizabeth's reign, during the autumn years of Elizabeth I's reign. He was making his own townhouse here. And positioning himself close to court, because that was crucial for any courtier, any Secretary of State. You had to be as close to the monarch as you possibly could be, so you could entertain her. And that was partly what he did here, as a bit of a housewarming. In 1602, on the 7th of December, he played the host here to Elizabeth I, who came in and was gloriously feasted and entertained. She got to see his assortment of weapons. She got to meet 3 women who were praising the virgin state. So you had a maid, and you had a widow, and you had a wife, who all came up and made little speeches to the Queen. And finally, a Turkish woman counted the Queen as well. Brought in a sort of an exotic guest. And it turned out the Queen could actually converse with her in her own language. So impressed was she that she gave a silk mantle to the Queen before she left. But apparently she strained her ankle upon being here, so she was definitely getting up in age by the time she had the chance to visit him at his home. But this was essentially the front of it, and it almost outlasted a century. It fell into ownership of his son William, who divided the house up into 2 houses. Little Salisbury House and Greater Salisbury House. And that ended up becoming what was known as the Middle Exchange. So after it was sold by his son, or after it had passed away from the hands of his son, the Little Salisbury House was converted into what was known as the Middle Exchange, which would have been around here, named for the new exchange that had been built further down the road. and that was meant to be another little shopping avenue. But instead, it became a place of ill repute. It was nicknamed as Whore's Nest later on. And it became so disheveled and filled with shady characters that in the end it was completely demolished at the end of the 17th century. So it didn't last very long, only for a couple of 20 years. But this is where it was. And the building has since then passed a few hands. It used to be up until recently, we're talking the 1990s, it was a joint venture, represented a joint venture between BP and Shell. So it's the head offices of Shell and BP here in London. But eventually, that came to an end. With both his own house and the New Exchange, there were stairs that were built down going all the way to the Thames. So you could row from across the Thames, get up here, and have a bit of a lavish entrance to Cecil House, which was here. But as I mentioned, it fell into decline, and it was finally demolished in 1695. And it made way for Cecil Street, where eventually it was built Cecil Hotel. And that is the same building, makes up this building here. But eventually it stopped functioning as a hotel and became a headquarters for Shell here in London. Shell with their venture company BP. And they were known in particular for their clock up there, which they call the Big Benzine. A bit of a competitor to Big Ben almost, and certainly one of the largest clock faces in the UK. About 7.62 meters in diameter. So that sort of became the iconic symbol of the building, and it's right between the Savoy Hotel and on the other side the Adelphi Hotel, which they're mainly offices today. Shell has moved out. They've got their own. They restructured their organization, so they didn't need a headquarters anymore here with BP, and now one of the biggest publishers inside. There's a bunch of book publishers in here, actually, with offices. One is Pearson, and there's a few others as well. But otherwise, they are mainly offices and hotels. That is what make up these three buildings, which has become sort of the Thames side face of the Strand, interestingly enough. But yeah, that is sort of the brief history of this area. Used to be belonging to Robert Cecil and be sort of his big development project of trying to get money and influence closer to Whitehall. Bit of a short one today, but like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Especially make sure to use, this is something I've learned today, use emojis in the comments, because that attracts better search optimization. That's what it's called. Yeah.